9:23 on the nose, right here on the Chris Berg Show on the We the People Network. With us back to finish this conversation. Want to get all your questions answered. It's that important to help you and I understand, can you and I make a difference in this process or not? Are they going to just tell us to go pound sand? Curly Haugland, the RNC North Dakota Committee Chairman, is back with us. We've got a bunch of phone calls as well. As you know, the number to call in case you're just joining us, 271-1100, 271-1100. Now, off the air, Curly called back in. He visited with me briefly about something, and it related to the email that Curly sent me yesterday. Curly, I just want you to share your thoughts as you can briefly. We got a bunch of phone calls I want to get to, but what this email essentially says and why it, in my opinion, tells us to go pound sand.
Well, really, what the pivotal question that seems to be coming up here is, why don't we bind our delegates to the results of the caucus? Simple answer, we don't do it because the Republican National Committee rules say that no delegate can be bound, and that's as simple as it gets. Every delegate is supposed to show up at the National Convention free to vote their conscience.
So is this whole thing just a big media ploy so they can make a bunch of advertising money?
That's essentially what I think it is, yeah. And, it's the political industry. Like I mentioned earlier, there's two distinct groups trying to choose our nominee. We have the political industry, which is the pollsters, pundits, the media, the political consultants, and the money on the one hand. And then we have the rank-and-file Republicans who go to conventions and fight their way to the convention to make a difference on the other hand.
I got to tell you, Curly,
I'm on the side of the party in the conventions.
It really pisses me off to know that the media, again, thinks, oh, these people are idiots. We'll give them some hope. It literally, and I hate to say this because I don't necessarily agree with all the violence in the film, but it's kind of like Hunger Games. When the guy says a little bit of hope is good, too much hope is powerful or something like that. And it's like, it gives us hope that we actually can make a difference in this process and really go pound sand. 271-1100. Yana Murdahl, your thoughts and comments, please.
Well, Chris, excuse my voice. I lost my voice this weekend at the convention. I want to look at a little broader picture because, there's fights going on. And frankly, I've told you this before, and I want to tell you listeners, I don't put my hope on Curly, or, Sarah Palin or Reagan or Berg or Sand or anyone. We got to get back to the table and put our hopes and our work into principles. And frankly, I have to say, my son was a page down there. He was 2 feet away from the mic where people rightfully brought up new nominees and stuff, and then it kind of went downhill. And the last thing that my 16-year-old son saw 2 feet away was crude gestures from those who were protesting. Character matters, Chris, and we need to get back to the fundamental things of, we can disagree with Curly, for that sake, or Yana Murdahl or Drew Wigley. That's great, but we got to do it with character, and we got to get to the table. And frankly, I'm wondering, where are those people today that are complaining so much about the system? Where were they 2 years ago? Are they rolling up the sleeves and joining Concerned Women for America or Tea Party Caucus or Taxpayer Association? Or are we just kind of whining and crying and liking to protest and not wanting to do the work in between? And it's not about the convention. It's about precepts. It's about character. It's about what America really needs to stand for. And let's get to the table and get that done.
Curly?
You're here. I'm all for it.
Yana, thanks for the phone call. Don, I appreciate you calling back in and being patient with us. Don, welcome to the show.
Yes, good morning. I want to bring up a few points. Like Jack Benny, I'm 39 and first voted in 1972, and I'm very well aware party organizations are private, and I was around when both parties only had a few primaries. If there was a contested presidential race, they'd use the primary to kind of get a feel who would attract the voters. Now, we go to March 1st, when I mentioned yesterday, I talked to my district chairman, and I asked him about delegates, whether they're bound. He showed me something, and apparently it was from 2008, where they were bound on the first vote. And so it was kind of a surprise what happened. Now, I'll jump to something else. While there's only 9,000 of us who voted in the caucus, I'll suggest we're the motivated people. We're fairly well informed. And I'd also suggest that when 76% of us vote against Romney, there's a reason. And the reason is we don't believe he's solid on important issues, whether selection of judges, government spending, and a too powerful federal bureaucracy. Now, let's go to the 2008 caucus. Remember, the Democrats had a caucus then, too. Now, I don't follow stuff enough, but imagine now Obama won the Democratic caucus. Imagine if
Don, do you have a specific question for Curly? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I got a bunch of phone calls here.
Yeah. The impression was these caucuses or these primaries mattered. And I suppose, was it true that there were delegates were bound in 2008? My impression from what Chris said yesterday, they were bound in the first vote.
Great question. Curly, can you comment on that? Because my understanding, too, is that you changed this last summer from binding to non-binding. If that's true, why?
That's true, and it's because we discovered, since 2008, we discovered the National Party rule that prohibits binding.
So the RNC, again, is basically saying...
we changed our rules to comply with the RNC rules. Well, the RNC rules trump everything. That's the Constitution of the Republican Party.
So let me just read this real quick for people that don't have this email in front of them, Curly. Again, Curly Haugland with us, RNC Committee Chairman, 271-1100, 271-1100. If you want to weigh in on this conversation, email talk@chrisbergshow.com. This is from the RNC, and Curly, thank you for emailing this to me. No delegate or alternate delegate shall be bound by any attempt of any state or congressional district to impose the unit rule. I want to get to some more phone calls here, but I read that and I go, I could have just stayed home Super Tuesday and hung out with my daughter. Perry Schumacher, welcome to the show. You're on with Curly.
Thanks, Chris. Say I know Curly, and Curly is a conservative, but there was a mess up here. There's two different things going on, and we need to clarify it for the people that weren't there. There was a fight on the floor for delegates. That's a political process. Those people should fight. The Paul people have been doing that around the country, losing votes and getting more delegates. What went around came around this time, but that is a legitimate fight. Now, the error by the North Dakota Republican Party was this. In 2008, the delegates were bound. They held a caucus this past March and did not make it clear to the public. There were no signs up at that caucus around the state that said, folks, these are non-binding votes. It was a straw poll. Their failure was in messaging. They conned the public into thinking it mattered, and that's why folks are upset. The people, Curly, your people did not do a good job of clarifying the message. If they would have said it's a straw poll, the people that wanted to vote would have went and voted, but they would have understood it wasn't binding. You failed in clarifying the message, and people think there was a bait and switch that went on, and that's the error. And I think that's the error you guys have to accept, that you didn't do a good enough job making the general public. You have the right to have whatever rules you want, but then clarify them to us so when we vote, we understand what the rules are. Does that make sense?
Curly?
Well, you're exactly right, Perry. I agree with you completely. Trust me, I was on the side arguing viciously to not have a caucus because of the very things you point out. It creates a false impression that it means something, and it doesn't. I'm sorry about that, but that's just the way it is.
Curly, I got an email here that came in from Bob Harms. A couple things I want to share with you and get your comments on. It says, Chris, Stan Stein is indeed a good man. And look, this is the thing, because I'm going to ask you about this in a moment. Some people are asking for Stan Stein to step down or for you to ask him to step down. And Stan Stein's a good man, Bob says. He's given hundreds of hours of his life over the last 6 months to guide the NDGOP through hiring a new executive director, reorganizing districts, new legislative candidates, organizing and executing a presidential caucus, and managing one of the most competitive and well-attended conventions in over a decade. Completely agree. He donates all of his time. It is not an easy gig. I said this yesterday. In my opinion, and Curly, I'm going to ask you this real quickly. Should the GOP chairman position be a paid position?
No. Why
not?
Well, because we have a history of volunteerism in the party, and when you have a paid position, then that just kind of contributes to the process of moving it into political industry control as opposed to activist volunteers. And Stan Stein is a saint, not a sinner.
So money's the root of all evil. Okay,
well,
271.
They always say
271-1100. He goes on to say, and this is what I want to get to. He says, finally, and most importantly, the party rules provide prior to or at the convention to discuss voluntarily apportioning delegate representation on the first ballot to reflect the results of the presidential caucus. And I think that's where you're having the hang up here, is people thinking that they make a difference, and in reality, they don't. And you said they were binding at one point. Now they're not. When they were bound and you showed up at the national convention, was the first ballot then in proportion to the way North Dakotans spoke?
It didn't matter last time because we had this presumptive nominee business. You see what I mean? It only matters if there's more than one candidate at the convention.
But
anyway, getting back to that, what you just read, though, the final line of that paragraph is every delegate is free to vote their conscience or something to that effect. I don't know if that was in. I don't.
That was not in this email. That was not. So essentially,
see, that's the point. I mean, a lot of times people don't use all the information. we need to read all the words and pay attention to all the words.
So bottom line, Curly, is this. What you're telling me, at least what I'm hearing, is that the RNC rules trump state party rules, and the RNC rules essentially say, hey, let's go out, let's get people involved in the primary, get them involved in the caucus, the media can make a bunch of money, it looks good, builds momentum for us to raise money for our candidates, but at the end of the day, come Tampa, those people that went and participated in the primary caucus could as well just gone and pound sand.
Well, first of all, just let me say, the rules of the Republican National Party are available to anybody online. And anybody that wants to go read them, you can go read them, and you'll find that there is no promise in those rules that these primaries and caucuses matter.
Curly, can I interrupt you respectfully, sir?
Sure.
Would you go and represent yourself in trial?
Absolutely.
You would. So you would not get an attorney, and you would represent yourself.
Well, I feel that depending on the condition of, yes, I would represent myself. Why
All right.
not?
Well, and obviously you're smarter than most people, I would presume. But I think most people would say, you know what, I'm not going to represent myself. I haven't studied law. I don't know the law books. So that's my point is, look, people have got a gazillion things going on in their lives. They're not going to sit down and I hate to say this to you, but read the Republican National Committee rules.
Well, that's fair enough. But, if you want to criticize people for following the rules.
No, I'm not saying that, but I think that's what Perry's saying is how can we better communicate to people, hey, these are the rules and understand this is the process and we're going to abide by them.
Trust me, I understand that. And that's why I'm an advocate for following the rules, and I have been an advocate in this process to make sure that we do follow the rules. That's why we don't bind our delegates to the results of the caucus, because the rules prohibit it.
So essentially the RNC says no matter what you guys do out there in caucuses and primaries, it doesn't make a difference.
That's correct. Well, some people disagree with that. Some people disagree with that. Don't get me wrong. There are people running around thinking, you see, let me just tell you what's going on in Wisconsin today. They're having a debate or a primary vote, and at the end of the day, what's going to happen is whoever gets a plurality, okay, there's 3 or 4 candidates running over there. A plurality just simply means the most votes out of the crowd. So let's say the winner over there gets 35% of the vote. They have a winner-take-all deal. Okay, how does winner-take-all? Where the winner gets all the votes. You just read the rule I told you. No delegate or alternate delegate shall be bound by any attempt of any state or congressional district to impose the unit rule. The unit rule is defined as that where the entire vote of a delegation, if the state's party apparatus so chooses, shall be cast as a unit, disregarding minority votes in that delegation. Wisconsin's clearly going to violate that rule because they're going to say that whoever gets the plurality of the votes in that primary today gets all of the votes. So, in other words, the biggest loser wins. In other words, you have to have a majority to win anything, right? Mostly. But nobody's going to get more than 50% in Wisconsin. So the biggest loser will be the winner.
I'm sorry, I'm not following that. The biggest loser is going to be the winner? Is this a weight loss program now? Or I don't get that.
Well, what I'm saying is the biggest vote getter is going to be the winner. But the winner, traditionally, of an election is somebody gets a majority, 50% plus 1. That's not going to happen in Wisconsin today. Yet the winner, according to Wisconsin's rules, is going to get all of the votes. Well, the minority votes, which are going to be greater than the winner's votes, are disregarded. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, it definitely seems more fair than giving all of our most of our delegates to a third-place finisher in a state. That's for sure. I mean, I think
that's a misconception too, though, Chris. Let me point out, we did not ask anybody who made an application to be a delegate who they intended to vote for.
I understand that.
That's not part of the criteria, and we don't know how people are going to vote. We can't know how they're going to vote until we get to the convention. So when we get to the convention, a secret ballot will be taken, and the only thing that's going to be known about our delegation is the final outcome in terms of numbers, depending on who's still in the race.
Curly, I want to say
we can't.
Go ahead, sir.
We can't tell how our delegates are going to vote until they actually vote.
Thank you for your time, Curly. I know we're going to have you on the TV show tonight, so I appreciate that. We're going to have a couple minutes here for open phones. Curly, we'll talk to you again soon, okay, sir?
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much. Again, Curly Haugland, RNC Committee Chairman. I want to take a couple of your phone calls, and this emails have been pouring in. We're going to have just a few moments, and then later on this hour, we're going to talk about some karaoke happening tonight, a chance for you to actually go out and make a difference. I'm going to give you an opportunity tonight, to go out and actually make a difference where your actions, your time will help support veterans that are homeless locally in the area. Shocking. I think I'm presuming most of you out there going, wow, you know what? I knew the media sucked, but this really pisses me off. 271-1100, 888-598-8464, talk at chrisbergshow.com. Bob Harms, thanks for the email. I appreciate that. We'll be right back.